I've been researching changes in leadership and management styles for years, and during the first wave of the pandemic in June or so, I realized that I had done a number of surveys in the previous 2 years, which I could then do again during the pandemic. And then compare the results. And that is, if you're a sort of a social scientist and academic, that is vital, because one of the problems with the survey we've just done is, of course, we are retrospectively making sense of what we used to be like, and that's incredibly difficult to do. So my results, that I'm going to share a couple of the highlights. My results are not going to be completely consistent with what you just said, but I actually believe my results, in the main, are valid, because the pre-COVID data was literally measured before anybody knew that COVID was a thing. And when you ask exactly the same questions during COVID with roughly the same samples of people, you can draw some useful insights. So I'm going to share a couple of the highlights from the research, and I'll try to pick up on how those results are different to what you just said. Just by way of clarity, I'm not interested in this research in sort of what you and I are doing as individuals. I'm particularly interested in how our managerial or leadership style has changed through the pandemic. And essentially what I did was I measured a bunch of the stuff that Richard has actually shared with you. And I bucketed the activities of the manager leader into three categories. I took sort of cognitive reflective work, essentially, sitting, in front of your computer, thinking about problems, resolving, issues in your mind, making sure that you understood issues properly. Sort of, one of the parts of any manager's job is cognitive and reflective. The second was making things happen. In other words, actually getting to decisions, bringing the right people around the table, making sure that everybody knows what they're doing and executing, sort of the action part of your job. And then the third is what we can call the behavioral or the social parts of your job, which is getting things done through others. In other words, making sure that the people who report to us and the people in our wider team feel energized, motivated, safe, secure, all of the things that we as leaders or managers feel is a big part of our job. And essentially, if you take those three categories of activities and you say, using exact same questions pre-COVID and during COVID, where do we see differences in how effective people have been? The answers from my data were, when it comes to cognitive and reflective work, people actually reckon they are being more effective during lockdown. And that is, for me, completely understandable, because we've got fewer disturbances. We are not being interrupted every few minutes by people around us. We can actually focus on the task in hand and get to the bottom of it. When it comes to being effective at making decisions and solving problems and getting the right people on the job, it turns out that on average, people are seeing themselves as being marginally more effective during lockdown than they were before. And that for me is because we've got a good sense of who our teams are. People are quite task focused. People are quite good at saying, this is a crisis. I need to make sure that I deliver as required. And it turns out that basic coordination over Zoom, when it's people works pretty well. The big surprise, and this is going to be very different to what the results of the survey that you just did say, is that when it comes to the people side of your jobs, and this is getting the best out of your team, motivating others, having difficult conversations, the creative stuff, which is a separate category in some ways, all those people aspects are significantly, in academic terms, there's a particular meaning to significantly, but you'll have to trust me on this, significantly lower rated during lockdown than before. So even though our intentions during lockdown for communicating effectively and managing and getting the best out of our team and trying to energize people, even though our intentions have been good through that whole period, the evidence says that actually, in terms of what happened before versus what happened during, we are struggling a little bit. So I've written an academic paper on this. I'm happy to share it with you. And I call the book, the paper, I call it The Blinkered Boss. And why I use the word blinkered is that my evidence suggests that during a lockdown situation, when we're not quite as engaged in a day-to-day basis with the people around us, it is easy to turn inward. It is easy to turn towards getting things done, productivity, efficiency, and task. And it's very easy, actually, to let some of the more social aspects of getting the best out of the people around us to slip. And as I say, no one is intentionally doing that, but it's just that much harder to spend the time doing those things. So that is the headline from the findings of my research. We're turning a little bit inward, and as a result, we have to be doubly cautious or thoughtful about making the most of our relationships with our colleagues. And of course, that's an average finding. Many of you are already doing everything I'm about to say, but it doesn't mean that it's easy, and we've got to actually work harder than before. And a big part of that, of course, is because the levers of influence that we have as leaders and managers of others are much more curtailed. We simply don't have the opportunities on a day-to-day basis that we had when everybody was in the office. So let me just finish with two observations, and then I will give the floor back to Richard. I did a lot of interviews around the research, and one comment is worth repeating here. I'm going to try to quote it exactly. The guy said, "I used to think of the office as the place to get tasks done and home as the place for the social stuff. And now it's the exact opposite." And this is a guy who's essentially now being allowed to go into the office 1 or 2 days a week. And what he's saying, of course, is that the office is a place where lots of things happen. And a lot of it's actually quite social. And he's, like many of us, he's craving those social opportunities. And strangely enough, the place of work at home is hugely kind of efficient in terms of just putting your head down and working. But if I want to socialize and indeed get work done socially, if you see what I mean, then the office is the place to do it. So that's one. And then the second one, which is where I'll stop, is professional development, becoming better at doing your job. That's not just about attending training courses. That is about doing challenging new work assignments. Many of you will have heard of the so-called 70-20-10 principle, which says that real learning and development happens through on-the-job experiences and challenging assignments. Well, one of the real challenges that we faced over the last 12 months is that it's so easy as a manager or leader of others to put your A team on the difficult jobs. In other words, we've got something to be done. I know those people can do the job, so I'm going to ask them to do it again, because it's hard to get a new team together in lockdown. The trouble is, that means that the B team, or the people who are, shall we say, apprentices and who would otherwise join the A team, those people are not getting the opportunities. There's a concept out there called situated learning, which is that most learning happens experientially in an apprentice-like fashion by joining a team, first of all on the periphery, before moving, if you like, into the center of it. And it feels to me like many of those learning opportunities that a lot of people in our organizations need, a lot of those learning opportunities have been put on hold. And so there's a real opportunity for all of us who lead or manage others to be much more thoughtful about giving apprentice-like opportunities, internships, opportunities to do things which otherwise we wouldn't actually have the skills for, even in a lockdown situation. So